Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Dustin Riechmann. Dustin runs Seven Figure Leap, where he helps agency owners, coaches, and consultants turn podcast guesting into an actual growth channel instead of a box check. He's coached hundreds of people through his process of getting on the right shows. He is also on the other side of the mic as a host himself, so he sees the good and bad of pitches from both directions. Now, I wanted to have him on the show because one, I really like Dustin. He's a genuinely great person, and two, I get a flood of guest pitches every single week, and almost all of them are terrible. Podcasting is an awesome way for agencies to get their positioning out, their word out. And I think Dustin has actually built a repeatable system for doing this well. And it goes just way deeper than, sending some more emails. So in this episode, we discuss why generic cold pitches and podcast booking agencies rarely land and what a good pitch actually sounds like, why treating podcast guesting like account-based marketing beats playing a numbers game, how to turn a single strong appearance into a call to action people actually remember, and more. No one was asking for another community, but I've made one anyway. So what's different? The dynamic agency community is designed around access rather than content. Access to peers who've done it before. Access to experts who've designed solutions. Access to resources that have been battle tested. And right now, the price for founding members is only $97 a year. Join today so your agency has immediate access to everything you need to grow. You can join at dynamicagency.community. And now, Dustin Riechmann. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. As a podcast host, I get tons of pitches for people that want to be on my show. And some of them could be decent fits, but the pitch is always like miserable. What is the secret to pitching to get on podcasts?
Well, great question, Chris. And I can say that even before I had a podcast, I got pitched for my podcast that didn't even exist, right? Because this is definitely a problem, and it's gotten a lot worse with AI. So I would say the secret to doing this well is to actually not send cold pitches. That doesn't mean you can't send numerous pitches and that you can't do this as a sustainable marketing effort, but each pitch really does need to be unique to that host and connect with them in some relational way. And with that, I'd say that's part one. And part two, the sister to that, that's also really important, is that you should always be leading with the value to the recipient, in this case, a podcast host, which really means the value to their audience. So don't write a pitch that makes you sound like God's gift to the topic and set you up in some weird third-party language. Is like, it would be a favor to you as the host. I will grace you with my presence. It's always in a humble, service-oriented way that's all about specific value you can give their audience, and that will cut through a lot of the noise out there.
Mm-hmm. I think my favorite pitch so far has been someone saying, the first line was, "This is a pitch. Like, let's cut to the chase."
It's good.
And then they're like, "It looks like your podcast does this." And all right, you know what? Because he was so different, like I threw him a bone, and then he never responded to anything. So it's like, okay, well, good, you missed that one, buddy. But for the most part, these pitches are coming from podcast booking agencies, and they're bad. Like, I know you didn't listen to my podcast. Like, why are you opening this relationship with a lie?
Yep.
Right. Like, all of these different things. And so, yeah, I think the more personal approach, right, of being able to say like, "Hey, here's what I can actually do for you. I have listened to your show. We know these same people," like finding any connections to be able to make it work. It's like, it feels obvious.
Yes.
But yeah, is it just like because people are going for the mass play? Like,
yes, I think that's a big part of it. So there's really like two flavors of how this typically gets done. One is basically just cold email, like the same way people do cold email for marketing, where, hey, if I send 10,000 of these, maybe 10 will say yes, right? And so they necessarily just have to be generic and sort of like scraping emails off RSS feeds and going out into the masses and hoping someone says yes. So that definitely happens. And you can immediately see the patterns when that's happening, because if you are on the receiving end of any of these, you'll see that. You'll be like, oh, this is one of those. There's like bucket A is all those. And then the other is one you just mentioned is podcast booking agencies. I'm always a little careful about this because I have friends in the industry. I think they can serve a valuable role. For example, if someone's like, hey, I'm writing a book, my publisher says I have to get on 10 podcasts. I actually don't care about like what they're about, or I don't expect any business results. I'm not trying to get leads. I just need to say I've been on 10 podcasts. You should go use a booking agency because that's what they do well, right? Like they're paid to put you onto a podcast and check that box. Now, in the pitching part of that, again, they're templated and they are doing kind of how I opened in part 2 of my answer to how to do this well, Chris, was I feel strongly that a good pitch will come from the individual and it will be connecting with the host and it'll be showing how I, as the individual, wants to serve your audience. An agency, just sort of by the nature of them being a third party to that, that relationship, they always write them like Chris Dubois is the best-selling author of this. And, he did this in his business and, he would give you the pleasure of being on your show. And I've yet to meet a host, and I talk to a lot of them, right, in the work that I do, who's received that well. That's kind of like, sounds like it's the wrong posture, right? And so coming at it from a place of third-party introduction and like it's clearly like an agent athlete sort of relationship, which almost immediately feels adversarial to the person they're trying to sign, if that makes sense, to use a sports analogy. So but the big idea here is, in whether it's just a mass cold email or it's an agency who's doing this repeatedly as sort of a conveyor belt assembly line process, it's missing the personal connection and it's missing the core value proposition that I think I'm sure we'll get into makes this actually effective, which is I, as an expert, want to come onto your podcast to serve your audience and add unique value, fill a gap in your content, get to know you, build a relationship. Like that's actually the exchange of value. And I feel like both a cold email or an agency approach, a booking agency approach, is typically focused on a transaction. And it's like, I want to check a box. Will you check my box? And like, I don't actually care about who you are or who your audience is. And of course, that starts the whole relationship off on the wrong foot.
Right. And I think it was a term you used last year, actually, at the agency builders thing, the relationship marketing.
Yes.
And how you're like, you focus on that. And so like that concept, definitely bleeds through all of this. But so I guess, would you say, so it's almost like you need like an ABM approach to podcast guesting, right? It's like, let's actually find those podcasts that are like bigger accounts, like accounts in air quotes for anyone just listening, that we want to win. And then let's actually do a targeted approach. What would convince this person, like of the value I'm able to provide and get me on the show versus let me get a bunch of these small accounts and hopefully they all stick and do something good.
Yeah, I think, I would say that is true. And so I like the account-based marketing sort of analogy here, because what that really says to me is it's very intentional, right? Like it's like I am choosing these 10 podcasts for very specific reasons, and I'm going to be personal in how I approach them. And I'm going to be first and foremost focused on building a relationship with that host. Like that's the main objective. Getting on the podcast, of course, is a good confirmation that I've done that well, right? But they don't have to be large though, right? So podcast selection, like why do I want to be on podcasts in general? And then why would I pick specific podcasts? Can be, hey, they have a large audience and the audience is super aligned with my expertise. And I'm sure there's some clients in there and I want to generate leads. That's great. However, some of my biggest successes have actually come from very small or medium-sized podcasts where either the audience was extremely niche and aligned with me and my values and the things that I teach, and or the host is just like an amazing relationship, right? So building a relationship with the host and the collaboration there could be a really good reason to quote unquote target that podcast. And then the other thing I think people don't look at enough is what's the guest list? Because if you get on that podcast and you do a good job, you now have access from a relationship building standpoint to all the other guests that have ever been on that show as well. And so you kind of like select the cool kids club that you want to become a member of. And that can be another reason to be on a show. So size is definitely one of the big criteria, but not the only criteria. Mm-hmm. But the bigger idea of what you said about ABM, totally true. Like our whole strategy is quality over quantity. I don't want to pitch 1,000 or 10,000 podcasts. I don't want to be on that many, but I want to be on the right one. So we're much more like, let's pitch 10, get on the right 5, and then really leverage each of those 5 opportunities to build relationships and just, create exponential growth from those 5 versus doing it, viewing it as a temporary transaction and going to the next one. It's like, no, we're going to be super intentional about the ones we want to be on. And then when we get that opportunity, we're going to really kind of squeeze all the juice out of it and make sure we're adding as much value as possible and therefore receiving as much value as possible.
Right. So let's take it back a step. Before you can even pitch, you need to understand where your value is, yes. Right? What am I going to pitch? What's your process for working through that?
Yeah. So kind of big picture here, we kind of basically have a 5-step framework, and pitch is right in the middle of it. So they're all P's, purpose, plan, pitch, perform, profit. And we can zoom in any of these that make sense today. But real quickly, just give an overview because they're in sequential order. Purpose is what you're asking me right now, which is like, who do I want to target? What's the transformation I provide my clients? What's the messaging around that? Like, what is the emotional authority building story that I really need to convey? Like, to me, that's the most foundational step is like, why am I doing podcast guesting? Who am I trying to reach? How do I know if I'm winning? And what's the messaging that goes with that? Step 2 is plan, which is basically finding the right shows, which actually becomes pretty easy once you've done a good job with step 1. It's like, I know exactly what I'm trying to accomplish and who I'm trying to reach. Finding the podcast is really fairly easy at that point. That's step 2. Step 3 is pitch, which is, I know the shows I want to be on. How do I get on them and basically do what we were just going through as best practices? Step 4 is perform. So it's like, hey, congratulations, you found great shows. They said yes. Like, how do you actually show up and do a good job? Like, what is going to compel people to take action towards the goals that you have for that relationship and for that podcast audience? And then step 5 is profit. Again, this is where like what we do takes a big diversion from like what a booking agency would do, because most of our focus is the profit part. I like podcasting. Like I like
money
stories.
More.
But I wouldn't do it if it wasn't to grow my business, right? So the people I serve are entrepreneurs, they're agency owners, they're creators. And the reason they're doing this is because it's an effective marketing channel. So we spend most of our time with our clients on the profit part, but you can't have the profit part. You can't leverage the appearance if it's not, going back. You did a good job on the interview, had a good call to action. You had to pitch the show to get there in the first place. You had to identify that was a really good show for you. All the way back to the foundation of where this question started, of knowing that what do I want, what are my goals, and who am I trying to reach? So that's why we do it in that order, because most people are like, how do I make money from podcasts? I'm like, well, let's take these 4 steps back and first figure out how you make money in the first place, who you serve, why they pay you, why they choose you, what messages resonate with your ideal clients. And once we do that kind of hard work up front, the flow from there into the podcast guesting opportunities becomes a lot more repeatable and consistent.
Yeah. Where do most people get hung up with the process?
Well, most people skip the first step. So, so that's fatal flaw number 1. People show up to me and they meet me and they say, "Oh, you do podcast guesting, strategy work. That's interesting. Which shows should I be on?" I'm like, I have no idea. Like, let's go back to step 1. So most people skip step 1, which sets them up for failure because they're on the wrong shows or they don't have a message that resonates with the host and the audience they're trying to reach. Or the other problem that happens when people do that, Chris, is like they're really good at the other steps, and not doing step 1 means you can't have step 5. And so they're really good at steps 2, 3, and 4 in there. In other words, they say, "Hey, I was on 100 podcasts this year." And I'm like, that's crazy. That's more than I've been on. Like that, tell me more. Like, do you have a business? And they say, yeah. I'm like, well, what did this do for your business? and they kind of look at me with deer in the headlights and they're like, nothing, or I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to track it. Well, that's because they never actually set up a purpose behind it. They never set KPIs and goals for it. So you can't really have the profit if you don't do the purpose. So I would say in general, the big strategic flaw people have is either they don't do step one, they don't define success and get clear on who they're trying to reach, or they do all this work, get on these podcasts, and they don't actually have a step 5, a profit system in place to leverage the opportunity that they've created. So they basically create the analogy, they create all these ponds and they put fish in them, but they never actually have like a fishing pole. They don't even know how to get the value out of it and all this work that they've done to create it. So I would say that's the real issue. And then more tactically speaking, the things people struggle with in the kind of middle part that's more podcast guesting specific is podcast selection. People are really bad at just figuring out which types of shows actually make sense for their goals. And they don't know where to start. They get overwhelmed. They either think there's no podcasts for their niche or there's way too many podcasts and they don't know where to start. And that kind of analysis paralysis trips a lot of people up in step 2 in this process.
So let's jump ahead to the profit piece.
Yeah.
What should we be doing within the podcast in order to get people, again, through a performance, I guess, to get people showing up, or what systems do we need to install like at the end of this?
Yeah. So in the interview, one of the key things is, you want to teach and provide value, but you typically want to do that with a story because that's what actually can, sticks with people and drives them to want to take action. So assuming you do a good job in the interview of positioning yourself and telling, a couple compelling stories that relate to people, the big bridge from that perform part to the profit part is a call to action. So a huge missed opportunity for people. If you're listening to this and you've been on podcasts, I would invite you to go back and kind of watch the tape. And how did you, in the interview, what did you tell people or not tell people to do at the end of the interview? So this call to action is really important because you want to have one clear, compelling, logical next step for the people listening who really want to go deeper with this topic. They just know exactly what to do. You want to prescribe, here's exactly what you need to do next. So that opens us up to the profit part. And then from there, it's really, and you said this kind of in the intro, it's the profit part is more than anything about how do you build high quality relationships at scale from these opportunities, right? And so it's multifaceted. We can kind of talk about this flywheel effect that we hope to create. But you can think of it in really basic terms. The listening audience, you got to give them a call to action, which is typically going to be an email, opt-in or some sort of lead magnet. So you can build a relationship there and make sales in whatever your process is for conversion. There's the host relationship, which there's lots of ways to leverage that and go deeper with that host. And then there's that guest list relationship that we talked about. And then I would say beyond that is sort of the halo effect that comes from the authority building that happens. So backlinks, AEO, SEO benefits, content repurposing, sort of the credibility of saying like, I now have this as seen on sort of logo, or I have this relationship with this thought leader in my industry that I didn't have before. So there's a lot of aspects to profit. That's why we spend most of our time there. But that bridge from interview to the profit piece of this is really, really important. And if you miss that, you kind of miss most of the opportunity from an interview.
Right. So probably way more tactical, like on this side. The something that I have loved doing is buying vanity links. And I probably have spent too much money on vanity links.
I got a whole bunch of them too.
But the ability to send people to like snapoffersystem.com instead of like dynamicagencyos.com/whatever. It's like even little things like that can be super helpful. Are there any other like quick tips you would recommend?
Yeah, well, that's actually a really good one. So if you think of the call to action specifically, a couple things I would say. One is if you get an opportunity to talk about it more than once in the interview and not save it till the end, that's really useful. At the end of this interview, Chris, I'm going to be giving people a playbook so they can go through these 5 steps on their own and actually find the right podcast, pitch them, and start getting some traction. So they're going to go to 7figureleap.com/playbook to do that, right? So I'm just demonstrating kind of tongue in cheek here. But the idea is like if you can seed either drop an URL, but at least talking about like, hey, I know we don't have limited time here, Chris, and you asked me about pitching. I actually have a template and an AI prompt that people can use to write a pitch the way that we write them. I'm going to give that away at the end of the interview. Like that's, so talking about the call to action multiple times is super helpful. And then kind of in the moment there, at the end of the interview, you just, number one cardinal rule is only give them one thing to do. I'd say this is the one that gets violated the most is either there's 0 things to do or there's 5 things to do, and both are basically worthless, right? So if I don't tell you what to do next, that's bad. But if I also say, yeah, like I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I had this recording the other day. If someone wants to email me, I'll send that to you. And I also have an event coming up, so maybe you can put that in the show notes, Chris. Like no one's going to remember or know what to do. Instead, you want to have one very, very clear, direct call to action. And you should either have a vanity link, like you said, like buy a custom domain that just redirects to whatever freebie you want them to access. Or if it's simple enough, you can use like, sevenfigureleap.com/playbook or / something really simple though, because the mindset you have to keep in mind is most people are listening to this interview while they're driving, walking, working out, and it has to stick. So the other thing I would say in that moment is always repeat it 2 to 3 times. And if you don't want that to sound awkward, you can say things like sevenfigureleap.com. It's the number 7 leap, like jumping, like not like a tree. So sevenfigureleap.com/playbook. And we're going to give you our playbook. So like I say it enough times that people are like, I remember I remember that.
Sneaky.
Yeah, I would say that's, I'm just hammering it here with my example, but those are all really, really good, like tactical things that people overlook in what the most important part of an interview. So.
Yeah, it's like some psyop stuff you got going on there. That's good. Yeah. So, okay, one of the things I have noticed personally, and no, I'm not throwing shade at any guest, but like very rarely do guests promote the podcast. So like I create clips from every podcast. I give them the guests. I give the raw footage. It's like, use this however you want. Like it'd be great if you'd mention the show, right? Let's build it up. And very rarely does that happen. But the shows I've been on where I promote the show, like, I mean, there's one that I ran ads to that podcast episode because it was great. It was a good performance for me.
We were in person. I'm like, that's ninja. That host is never going to forget that. So. And
that's exactly it. That led to, I think, the speaking engagement where we got to meet in person.
Absolutely.
And like it opened up other opportunities because of the relationship. What do you recommend people do for promoting? Obviously, they have all their own content. They're trying to get out. They have other things going on. How do they insert this into it so they can build that relationship and do all the stuff that they should be doing to, actually get the word out?
Yeah. I'll just tell you what we do and what we teach clients to do sort of as a standard operating procedure. And this is going to answer your question, but maybe expand just a little on relationship building with the host. So, and I'll do this. I promise, Chris. So like when this episode gets published, you're going to send me a link and you're going to say, hey, your episode's been published at a minimum. Hopefully like you do, a host may also say, here's some clips and some, images or different assets that you can use in marketing. But at the moment, like literally as soon as we get it and that email comes in that day, we have a process that says it goes to ClickUp and we have tasks that get assigned from that. Task 1 is Dustin personally leaves you an Apple rating or, or Spotify, whatever, for people listening, whatever is like native to you. So if you're a guest, in other words, one of the best gifts you can give a host is to leave them a 5-star written rating on a podcast player or YouTube, as a subscriber on YouTube. But if they're primarily a podcast, not a YouTube channel, a podcast rating and review is very rare. It really stands out, right? It's really hard to do that. And I also host a podcast, so I can speak from firsthand experience. So if you will just leave a rating and review and let the host know that you did that, you will be in the top 1% of their guests. Like no one does that. Yeah. And it literally takes like 45 seconds. Once you know how to do it, you can just get right on your app because like they're quirky. You have to do it on an app on your phone. So leave a rating review, let the host know. And as you're letting them know, basically respond to that and say, Chris, thanks so much. Like I had such a great time on your show. Like, I'm really grateful to get the opportunity to serve your audience. I went ahead and left you a 5-star rating on Apple, just as a thank you and a show of appreciation for all the work you put into this. So like, that's step one. And step two, leave a rating, say thank you. And then step three is what you actually asked. I really do try to make a concerted effort to at least post one time about this show and tag the host, right? So for me, that's LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media guy, but I do, I am active on LinkedIn. And so just a simple post that's like, hey, I had an amazing time with Chris, and you tag the host and you share that clip if they've already given you a clip, right? Or an image, and maybe give a little insider, knowledge of like, this episode was special to me because, or Chris asked me this unique question that no one's ever asked me. Just a little inside baseball. So it's not just like a generic scroll through sort of link to a podcast, but it's given your personal experience. Again, they're going to see that because you tag them. It's amazing. Like we do that. And then I think right now it's every other week, but basically we do kind of a digest in our email newsletter where it's like, here's my favorite LinkedIn post that we created this month. Here's a YouTube clip. Here's a podcast interview. And so it gives us multiple chances to also highlight. And when we do that, we send that email out to our list, and then we forward it to the host. Anyone that's highlighted in those that kind of highlight reel email, we forward it to them and say, hey, just want to thank you again for letting us share what we do with your audience. We highlighted you in our newsletter today. I mean, not hard to do, but you got to have a process to do it, or it's just sort of like you forget if you do this frequently. So we just have an SOP, and it literally creates like task, post on LinkedIn by X date, task, leave an Apple review, task, send a response to the host from, have Dustin send a response thanking them for this. So I know it's kind of a long answer, but that's a really, really important relationship building. It's not even a hack. It's just like a best practice, right?
Yeah. I think it was last month. I just took the top 10 episodes that I have, and I just tagged all of the people and said, hey, rank ordered. These are my most listened to guests. And it was good. A lot of comments and like engagement for the show, but it was funny because the guests started going like making fun of each other. Like, oh, I'll beat you, and like I'll take them out. And yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, and it's a really good. So that's you as a host, but if we're talking to someone as a guest, doing a post on LinkedIn and tagging 5 hosts that you've had the opportunity to be on their show this year, it tags them so they see it, but then they're almost always going to comment, right? Yeah. And then it's just another way to deepen the relationship. They meet other hosts maybe they wouldn't have otherwise met, and those. Right. Anytime you can tag multiple people in a post and it is for a logical reason like that, it gets tons of engagement. Like we do this, like we run a cohort-based program. So when we have start a cohort or when we like end a cohort and people are graduating, we will tag them in a LinkedIn post and kind of give a little like highlight of who they are or something they accomplished in the program. And I can tell you from that standpoint, and this goes back to what you just said, but the point is those comments are always going to be very positive. So when we do that with our clients, we always get comments that are like, hey, this is the best investment I ever made. Or like, this is the best 90 days. I just screenshot those. Those all become testimonials because now they're public information. So if you're a guest and you highlight the host, I can almost guarantee many of those hosts are going to comment and say, Chris, really grateful that you came on our show. You're an amazing guest. Or like, I implemented something you shared and it was amazing. Well, now you got a screenshot testimonial from a podcast host to use in another post or to leverage. So while these are relationship building and they're focused on serving the other person, the law of reciprocity means you're going to get good stuff out of it too. So I love that you mentioned that as a strategy.
Yeah. One of the last sections we get into, I want to talk about the ability to use a podcast guest list to build further relationships.
Yes.
What's the strategy behind that?
Yeah. So if it's not clear what we mean here, basically, if you're on a podcast, and I usually do this when it gets published. This is the other task that comes out of the list I was giving. I talked about all the ways we deepen our connection with the host. The other side of this is when my episode gets published, I'm now sort of part of this fraternity, right? This this club of people that have been interviewed on this podcast, so for me, I'll use Nathan Barry as an example. I was on the Nathan Barry podcast. And so now everyone at the day of my interview that had been interviewed on that show, I have a connection to, like I have credibility with, I've shared trust with, and it's cool because it's evergreen. He interviews new people every week. So basically I have this ongoing new list of people that I can connect with, and it's not a cold outreach, and they like already trust me because like they know Nathan's really cool. And if I was on his show, it means I must know something, right? And that's going to be true of any podcast you're on. So just imagine you get this list of other guests from the same show that continues to grow over time. And when you look at that, what you'll find is there's kind of three buckets of people in there. There are potential clients, like some of the people are potential clients, partners. So people that like are complementary to you. So they aren't necessarily a client, but they serve your clients in a different way. And then the third bucket, which will be substantial, are people with platforms like podcasts, right? So a lot of people that are guesting on shows also host shows. And so if you think about those three opportunities, and some people are in multiple buckets. They could be a potential client and they host a show, or they could host a show and be a great partner, et cetera. But the idea here is you've got this gold mine of relationship capital that you've opened up. And tactically, the way that we do this, and there's other methods if you're not on like LinkedIn, is we just connect with each of those people on LinkedIn, and we have a really simple connection request. It's like, hey, Chris, I know that I saw that you were on Nathan Barry's podcast. I was on there recently too. I'd love to connect with you. I'm not lying. I'm not saying I loved your interview. I'm just saying you were on it. I was on it. Let's connect. And you, as someone who's been on that show, is going to be like, I'm taking that request. Like they must be cool, like because they were on the same show. And then from there, after they accept the connection request, this is part of what we help people with on our program. But like, how do you take the conversation from there? It depends on which bucket they're in. It depends on kind of your normal sales process. But how this differs from cold outreach is they already like you and trust you in some way, and they have credibility and they know where you're coming from. They can even go listen to your episode if they really are curious about who you are. So these conversations happen as a warm conversation, not a cold conversation. So you still can't pitch slap people and like immediately be like, buy my thing, but you can have a really, really valuable pipeline here of conversations that can definitely lead to sales, partnerships, and I'd say most easily other podcast opportunities.
Yeah. So I want to hit you with a potentially very different question now.
All right.
What AI has changed a lot of different markets. Like I work with agencies, so everybody's being impacted in some way, some positive, some negative. What's going on in the podcasting space from that could be something to pay attention to, or this like a benefit for everybody?
So I would say, I spoke again to agency builders this year, and this was like my topic. So I'm going to keep this really brief, but at a very high level, I think more than ever, we've got this really tight tension between trust. I think we're in a trust recession, and I think AI is making it worse. And like, it's like, everything's sloppy and not very human and not connected. So we have this need for more trust. We also have this need for more scale, and we have this amazing technology to do that. Right. And so where I'm looking at this is like, how can I build trust at scale? And so I'm very much in the camp of not AI everything, but AI appropriate things, right? So how is it affecting podcasting? I think it's making podcasting as a industry, as a tool, as a medium more and more valuable, because especially in this type of podcasting we're talking about, which is like interview-based, human-to-human, education-based content, like people want that. They really do. Like we're wired to stand around campfires and tell stories and learn from each other. And podcasting is a really kind of uniquely scalable and personal way to do that, right? Like you and I are recording this one-on-one. We had a conversation before. I'm sure we'll have conversations after, but then lots of people get to listen to this later. And people that know you and trust you are going to be like, this Dustin guy must be trustworthy because he's on Chris's show, right? And so I think that podcasting in this format will continue to grow in importance, and it's going to continue to be more and more necessary to have long form educational content from a trusted authority in a format that's easily consumable. So I think that's a very positive thing. And I think on the negative side, like everything, we talked about this from the very beginning, as information is ubiquitous, as you could send 10 million emails in an instant, like you can do that. Doesn't mean you should. Well, then it becomes even more noisy and harder to break through. And so I think the opportunity in that is just being very anti-AI in how you do outreach, how you build relationships, how you actually care and get to know people. So yeah, we could do the whole episode about AI, but that my short version is there's great AI tools that make our process work better, and we provide those to clients too. But I will never let AI do this for me, either from a outreach standpoint or especially in the actual conversations, because that's also a thing where two AI clones talk to each other and it's a podcast, and it sucks because there's no emotion, there's no intonation, there's no tangents to go off of. Right. Like no one wants to listen to that, and you can tell it immediately when you start listening because it's like it literally sounds like two robots, and we're not looking. We're definitely not at a stage now in the space where we're trying to get more information. We're trying to get curated insights from other humans who can guide us along a path that we desire to go down. And that's why I think podcasting still remains a very strong way to do that. As long as we don't jump off the deep end and try to AIify everything. So,
right. I was using a notebook LM for some of my articles I was writing. And this way I could put an audio at the top of the article. So if someone just wanted to listen to it, awesome. I stopped using it because the two little AI hosts decided to crap all over one of my articles. And like, well, this is where it gets really boring. Like, what? Hang on. I created you.
Like, I own you. Stop.
Yeah, ultimately, it comes down to like what's better for the relationship.
Yes.
Right. And I think, ultimately, it's humans create relationships. There are some weirdos out there having relationships with their robots. That's you do you. But for the rest of us, I think the human touch needs to be packed in there. So
absolutely.
All right. 2 more questions for you. First one being, what book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
I'm going to say Unreasonable Hospitality. I know that's not like the newest book on the block, but I read the book when it came out. I've been listening to the audiobook recently, and actually Will Guidara and his business partner in his current business had a really cool interview actually on Nathan Barry's show, who I'd mentioned earlier. I feel like I really got to know and appreciate. Yeah, there you go. I got to know and appreciate them better. So the reason I say that is kind of an extension of what we were just talking about with AI. Like agency services are already and are becoming increasingly commoditized, right? So why would someone choose you and your agency over someone else? Is because you provide the best experience. Right? And so this idea of unreasonable hospitality, while Will's background is in restaurants, totally translates to agency services, to coaching services, to any services, right? How do people feel about you? How can you go deeper with them? How can you actually care, have a more qualitatively, like a higher quality relationship? Just provide the best experience. And so I think Unreasonable Hospitality should be a must read for any business person, but I'd say especially if you're in service businesses like an agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good one. And I do like, it's probably a good case for podcast guesting. Like I listened to the book when it first came out, and then I heard him on multiple other podcasts. And it was just like, you kept getting other stories and like hearing things that he had in the book, but like expounded on. And it was like, I wanted to keep following him via the podcast.
Yeah. I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm like, I put his name in. I'm like, oh, cool. He was on this one and this one. And, they're from different angles. He obviously tells different stories. Sometimes he's with his business partner. Sometimes he's solo. I've seen him speak in person. And each time's a little different. And that, like you said, it's a really good testament for podcast guesting as a strategy. And the reason that I want to double click on that is even if you ask me the same questions as another host asked me, I'm going to answer them differently on a different day because I'm in a different mood. You're going to have a different tone in what you're actually trying to get at. You're going to give different follow-ups. I'm going to have different stories based on what just happened to me this morning or whatever, right? And therefore, every interview is unique, even if you're talking about the same topic.
Right.
And that's what people want. They want that like deeper connection, because with that intimacy and connection comes more trust. And again, going back to the thing you need now is not more expertise, it's more trust to differentiate yourself as an agency or as another service provider. And so I think there's limited but important ways to build trust. And one of them is long form educational expressions and story based content around the work that you do and why you care so much about it and how you got into it and all that kind of stuff. And then of course, on your service delivery side, how do you make your clients feel super unique and cared for, which is where the unreasonable hospitality recommendation comes in.
Right. Last question. Where can people find you?
I don't know. I got 5 Instagram accounts now. So obviously, what we do is help people with podcast guesting as a strategy, work with a lot of agency owners, coaches, and consultants. So 7figureleap.com is our home base. And as I've mentioned a few times earlier, we do have a really cool playbook. Our whole business model is to basically give away everything that we know how to do in templates and step-by-step instructions. And then some portion of the market always wants personal help, a community, and coaching around it. And that's how we actually make money. So if you're like, I'm curious about podcast guesting and how to do these 5 Ps that we've talked about a few times today, you can go to 7figureleap.com/playbook, and it's free. And it's going to give you 5 sequential emails that are going to walk you through exactly how to get started with this. I know Chris has been through it and uses it. And even though he's not been a paying client of ours, I think you've got a lot of benefit from following some of the methodologies that we teach there. So 7figureleap.com/playbook is my call to action today.
Awesome. And we will get 7figureleap.com/playbook added to the show notes as
there
well.
We go.
Awesome.
It's awesome.
But all right, Dustin, as always, great chatting. Thanks for joining.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for having me on. It was great to share.
That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.